Is Marty Scurll the key to a AEW, New Japan, NWA, and Ring of Honor mass partnership? We talk about it next on the Squared Circle Psychobabble. Hello and welcome to the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. This is Ralph Valenti. For news, reviews, and conversations on all things pro wrestling, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. So with the news coming out last week that Marty Scurll has signed with Ring of Honor and he's being a part of the booking process, whether he's the head of booking or just a big part of it, that has had conflicting reports. But one thing that Dave Meltzer has said is that his job in his new contract with Ring of Honor backstage is that he is going to be the liaison, if you will, to get partnerships rekindled or formed with the likes of New Japan Pro Wrestling, NWA, and AEW. So I ask you, Ralph, should there be a partnership? How does it benefit everybody? And in the end of the day, will we see the partnership?
Yeah, well, I think we're already definitely seeing little bits of the partnership, because it's ironic, and I don't think it's by accident that once Marty Scurll was signed, all of a sudden, all of these New Japan guys were announced for Ring of Honor's big event down there on WrestleMania weekend. So I don't think that's by accident that happened right after he was signed. So there's that. Because if you think back, aside from the show
at MSG,
at MSG, I mean, most of the reports were New Japan Pro Wrestling was not interested in partnering with Ring of Honor any longer. Ring of Honor was really in a tough spot because they had so many of their top guys leaving. A lot of people assume that this could have been the final nail in the coffin for them, even though they've had some really good years leading up to this. But when you look at kind of who they had under contract and who was leaving and who had already left, they were in a tough spot. They didn't really have many big name guys other than Marty Scurll. Matt Taven, he's a big draw, I guess, for them, but he's not necessarily right. A really well-known name.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, I think that we're starting to see that, especially because you got guys from New Japan Pro Wrestling that are going to be competing in Ring of Honor. You have guys from the NWA and Ring of Honor going back and forth there.
Right. Like, with NWA, you have Marty Scurll showing up at the first pay-per-view.
Yep.
Now at Hard Times coming up this weekend before Royal Rumble, it will be Flip Gordon versus Nick Aldis for the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. You also have this faction war between Villain Enterprises and Strictly Business. Yep. Cole Cabana, who was in Ring of Honor, now in NWA. He's also in AEW. He also appeared on AEW Dark doing commentary. So the seeds have been planted where everybody's connecting the dots. So all these different talent sharing. Yeah. Obviously, we've seen Moxley and Jericho go to New Japan. New Japan mentioning the AEW Championship. AEW mentioning they're going to the Tokyo Dome and winning that weekend. It makes sense for everyone involved that this should happen. And the big part is, let's look at the talent. You watch just one of these promotions, NWA, you're going to see a lot of guys frequently every single week. Nick Aldis every single week. Tim Strong every single week. Colt Cabana, Ricky Starks. Eventually, people might get tired of them. We see it all the time in WWE. AEW, Jericho, Moxley, Omega, Hangman. How many times you're going to see them every week before you start getting overexposed to them? Ring of Honor, it could be Marty, PCO. Yep. By doing this talent sharing thing, you put people in different situations where they seem fresh all the time, where Marty Scurll could do a tour with NWA. Moxley can go and do the G1 at New Japan Pro Wrestling. Will Ospreay could do some stuff in Ring of Honor. It makes sense from that perspective. And at the same time, these guys are all getting exposure with different companies where if someone just watches AEW, they see a Will Ospreay match on AEW and they go, oh, well, he's actually the junior heavyweight champion in New Japan Pro Wrestling. I know he's not anymore, but let's say he was at this point. Now they go and watch New Japan Pro Wrestling or Ring of Honor. They see a guy like Nick Aldis showing up at Ring of Honor. Right. Oh, I didn't know he was in NWA. So now they're watching NWA Power on YouTube. It makes sense to do this.
Yeah, well, from that perspective, yeah, it definitely makes sense. And when you look at some of the goals of some of these promotions, especially like New Japan Pro Wrestling saying that they want to expand westward, like we talk about all the time, being able to have some of the best wrestlers on contract and being able to have that exposure into the United States through these partnerships rather than having to, go out, put on a TV show, try to build from the ground up. You already have Ring of Honor, which is established. You already have the NWA, which is somewhat established.
Mm-hmm.
Having your top guys be able to go to some of those places and compete is much easier, in my opinion, than having to start from square one and get the exposure. Because I think a lot of wrestling fans certainly know who Okada is and know how good he is, or know who Naito is and know how good he is. But the problem is going to be getting those guys over and exposure to the rest of the non-wrestling population, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
But through partnerships and through avenues like this, it can certainly happen much quicker. So it seems to make sense for them. Where I see issues ultimately down the road, I think is going to be the egos in booking, discrepancies in how people want their champions booked, issues with titles, stuff like that. When you think back to the history of like the territories and things like that, there were on occasion issues with who was recognized as a top champion, who was recognized as holding the most prestigious title, which belt was the most prestigious. For a long time, it was the NWA Championship. Then you look at a guy like Bruno Sammartino, the formation of the WWWF back then, kind of going away from the territories and recognizing him as the top champion.
Right.
I think that certainly times are different now, but if it's a hard ask. I mean, if you have a guy like Okada, right, go over to, let's say they do some super show between NWA, Ring of Honor, and New Japan, and you want him to get pinned by Nick Aldis, let's say, New Japan might not be open to something like that. And I know that a lot of people would be excited for this partnership, but ultimately I think those are the types of things that would inevitably happen that would only keep this as like a temporary thing.
Well, the thing that could rectify that is having these 4 promotions or whatever other promotions eventually add on. Maybe MLW gets involved in this. Maybe Impact Wrestling gets involved with this too. And they decide on this one title, like the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship was, as the National Wrestling Alliance all agreed this was the top title, and that top champion tours throughout the different territories. So Ric Flair would be seen at AWA, Mid-South, Mid-Atlantic, WCCW, it happens there, where today you have that top championship, whatever they decide to call it. This could just be all fancy booking, all speculation, and me just rambling on here, but they have a top championship, and it's Okada that has it for a while, and you see him defend it in all these different shows, and all the different promotions present it as the top championship, so that when he does gets defeated by Nick Aldis, now Nick Aldis is the top champion, he does a tour all over the place. Then he drops it to a guy like Cody Rhodes, and then Cody Rhodes goes around.
Yeah, and Here's the problem with that, and here's what I foresee. So I agree that something like that is certainly logical, at least on paper, assuming that there's no egos and no issues. But it has happened in the past where there's situations where, let's say, for example, you have somebody win that title, and they don't want to recognize that title as the most prestigious title in all of wrestling, right, amongst those groups. I don't know if it was the NWA title or they called it something else, but anyway, so you look at like Shane Douglas. He won the title. That was the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. He took the title. He said it was a piece of crap. He threw it down, and then he had the Eastern Championship Wrestling, which became ECW Championship. All it takes is something like that, something as silly as this medal title that is supposed to signify, the most prestigious, most coveted thing in professional wrestling. And a company saying, yeah, you know what, we liked working with you, but we want to recognize our title as the most prestigious. So let's say whoever, Cody Rhodes holds it. He goes on AEW 1 week on Dynamite, and he takes the title and he throws it down. those are the types of things that can potentially happen,
Right.
especially because there are so many egos and because it has happened in the past.
Right.
I mean, right now, yeah, you're seeing these guys go back and forth, and all it takes is one person with a bad ego and a bad temper to kind of ruin the whole thing.
True.
So,
Well, here's the other thing too that could create a mess is television time. Obviously,
yep.
the goal is to have all these promotions end up on television so that more people have a choice of what wrestling they want to watch. Obviously, AEW has started something that, hey, we could be a startup promotion, end up on TNT, and pull almost 1 million viewers consistently after 3 months. Ring of Honor, has had a tough time getting TV deals, especially, which I still have no idea why, because they're owned by Sinclair Broadcasting. You would think they would have some kind of decent TV deal just with whatever networks they have or can make with other people. New Japan wants to start this westward expansion. They lost their TV deal with Access because they didn't want to deal with Impact Wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
NWA, yes, they're doing stuff on YouTube, but do they want to expand onto TV? MLW just announced that they made a partnership where that could eventually lead to a big TV deal as well.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually we're going to have either competition on a certain day, or they all agree and say, hey, AEW, we agree to go on Wednesdays. Power, you do Tuesdays. New Japan, you do Thursdays. Ring of Honor, you do Sundays. Whatever the case may be.
Yep.
So that everybody gets their own day and no one, breaks into their own rules, and no one's ego really plays an effect on that. So.
I mean, that would be the hard thing with that. I think is that at what point is it oversaturated with too much wrestling? Because right now, when you look at Mondays and Fridays,
but they're all different promotions, so it's not like, oh, I'm an AEW fan, I have to watch Ring of Honor.
No,
like,
that's
if you're
true.
a WWE fan, people have said it's oversaturated because, well, I have to watch Raw on Monday, I have to watch SmackDown on Friday, I have to watch NXT on Wednesday, NXT UK on Thursday, a pay-per-view on Sunday. Mm-hmm. That's where I get people saying it's oversaturated, but you can watch SmackDown and not watch Raw.
Right. So the point I'm getting at is this: at what point is it like the law of diminishing returns, where if you have all these companies working together, where it's too much to keep track of? Like if you have one lineal champion, that's the head guy or the top champion amongst all these. If something happens on an episode of, let's say MLW or Dynamite, and that top champion loses the title, or there's some major storyline, and you weren't watching because you like to watch Power on Tuesday, and you're like, wait a minute, I can't keep up with this anymore, and you get frustrated and just stop watching altogether. It's a lot of wrestling to keep up with, especially when you have multiple companies that you're trying to pay attention to. So, yes, I think it would be a cool thing for all of them to work together, but for all of them to be able to really build and grow and stuff like that, and not actually compete against one another, it'd be hard for them to grow and expand while working together.
All right, so I'm going to put a poll above my head right now. Vote if you think there will or will not be this mass partnership between AEW, Ring of Honor, NWA, and New Japan Pro Wrestling. Ralph, I'll ask you the question. Will we see the partnership between these four?
For right now, I don't think AEW is going to participate. I think we see it between Ring of Honor, NWA, and New Japan Pro Wrestling, but I don't think AEW comes to the table for quite some time.
I'm going to agree for now and say that AEW isn't a part of it, because while they mention that Jericho and Moxley went to the Tokyo Dome, they don't mention New Japan Pro Wrestling. Like, New Japan Pro Wrestling said, hey, Jericho is the AEW champion. There was a part where, Kenny Omega is the AAA Mega Champion, and the Lucha Brothers are the tag team champions. And at one point they were mentioning that. Now they're not. Mm. So maybe AEW is preventing, the involvement of other promotions, and it might do what WWE does. And, whatever happened at other promotions, we'll slightly hint it, but we're not going to outright say, hey, AJ Styles and Nakamura had a great match in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Check it out. It will be, no, they have their history in Japan. Mm-hmm. And you have to do your research.
Right.
I think that's what AEW is going to be doing for a while, until they can consistently have that 1.5, 2 million. And then maybe if someone wants to come and say that we could provide something that AEW can't do right now, that's when AEW might say something. But I think right now, what is there to gain from this other than giving people dream matches that they want?
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest here. That talent would be the only thing that any of these companies, I think, can offer AEW to this point. Because right now they just got the expansion on their contract, so they've got TV through what, 2022?
2023.
2023. They've got another night of TV that they're going to get. So, you know, AEW has more to offer to these companies than they have to offer to AEW. They all want that national TV deal. I gotta imagine. I mean, if you're a wrestling promotion, to have the type of TV and the backing of a billionaire and all of that, that's all the stuff that a wrestling company would want. So, you know, AEW right now is in a really good position, and they don't necessarily have to work with these other wrestling companies, I don't think.
True, but who knows? Maybe they just want to give the fans what they want in all those dream matches, you know? So only time will tell.
Right.
And, you know, I think the key here, obviously, is Marty Scurll, because his hand has been involved with all these promotions except for AEW, but having his friends being the elite.
Yeah.
Well, it could happen, but right now, like I said, Ring of Honor, NWA, New Japan, like you said, definitely AEW might, until we see something for them to be offered something that AEW can't do, that partnership might not involve them. So let us know in the comments what you think of a possible partnership between these four promotions in the comments below. Don't forget to share this all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at SCPB Podcast. And for news, reviews, and conversations, all things pro wrestling, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. For Ralph Valenti, my name is Michael Valenti. Thank you for watching the Squared Circle Psychobabble.